You're watching EAC News. Thank you for joining us. Today, August 22nd, marks a momentous day in modern Cambodian history. Today, Prime Minister Hun Sen officially resigned after nearly 40 years in power. In his place is current Prime Minister Hun Manet, who presented his cabinet this morning for approval by the National Assembly, was voted on by a vote of confidence, along with the National Assembly officially making him Prime Minister. He is currently at the Royal Palace, where he and his new Council of Ministers will be swearing an oath in front of King Norodom Sihamoni. On July 26, just 3 days after the election, Prime Minister Hun Sen announced he would be resigning his position and called it a sacrifice on behalf of the nation's stability, peace, and development. So this morning, former Prime Minister Hun Sen gave his final speech as the Premier of Cambodia. In it, he talked a lot about the time that he had spent in office. He was very proud of the 44 years plus that he had spent in Cambodian politics. And he said that it was time for the old generation to make way for the new generation. The Cambodian People's Party, for which he's president, has a slogan of "Keep the old and increase the new," meaning that the older members of the party are expected to stick around in advisory roles, while the CPP tries to get as many members as it can. It's very welcoming to anybody who would like to join, so long as they do not associate with certain opposition members. Hun Manet is the oldest son of Prime Minister Hun Sen. He was chosen by the Cambodian People's Party in 2021 to be the next Prime Minister, which happened just today. So on the scene at the Royal Palace, we have EAC News reporter Anthony Ellis. Anthony, hello.
Hello, Kristen. Yeah, that's correct. As you mentioned, this morning the ministers were voted in confidence, and now Prime Minister Hun Manet is now the new leader of Cambodia. So like you said, after his takeover from his father, who'd been in leadership for nearly 40 years.
Very good. So is new Prime Minister Hun Manet, he is currently at the Royal Palace?
That's correct. As you can see behind me is just the entrance into the Royal Palace, and just further up the driveway is the Royal Hall. So all the ministers and the Prime Minister Hun Manet have arrived, so they're going through the ceremony now where they'll be sworn in by their king.
Very good. And I know you were at the final speech of former Prime Minister Hun Sen this morning. He talked a bit about Hun Manet taking over and what that meant to him. So what are some of Prime Minister Hun Manet's qualifications, and why did Prime Minister Hun Sen decide to resign?
Hun Manet is like a typical proud father. Today he showed emotion as a father and as a person. Now he picked Hun Manet because of his education. As we know, he went to West Point as a graduate, which is in the States there. And then he followed, I think, into New York, and also, so his education was a lot higher. And felt that it was time for and ready for him to move up. He had two choices he was thinking about as coming up to elections. One was that for him to continue as the Prime Minister, or put into Hun Manet as Prime Minister. And as the date of election and the voting polls were coming in, he didn't ask how many votes that were voted for the CPP. He was actually asking what was the percentage. And he said if it was roughly 74%, he would have stayed on as Prime Minister. And because it reached 82%, he then announced his retirement and put Hun Manet. Like I said, he was a proud father today. He had a few tears in his eyes to show his emotion. And he said that Hun Manet was ready and was well educated. And he's also mentioned that how a lot of people said that there was a family feud between the brothers, and there wasn't. It's the brothers Hun Mani and Hun Manet had mentioned that they did not want to rise higher than Hun Manet, and they stick by him all the way.
All right, so currently inside the royal palace is newly ordained Prime Minister Hun Manet with his new council of ministers. And it looks like only 6 ministers are sticking around from the previous administration. Can you tell us any more about the new ministers in the council?
Yeah, you're right. The Minister of Agriculture, Dick Tinner, is staying around, and also the Fine Arts is staying around as well. So there is a lot of history with the new ministers. They're a lot younger, and a lot of their fathers were ministers, so they're taking also from their fathers' positions in the ministry.
Very good. And Anthony, what's the scene like where you're at right now? It doesn't seem to be many people around.
No, it's media only at the front of the palace. Any bystanders are not allowed into this area. Simple reason because of the ceremony and security reasons. You can see the gates open behind me. There is a lot of police and bodyguards presence. But I think it's just more of a safety because it's a new government forming. So I think the security risk is a little bit higher. Just on the outside of the park here, there is quite a few people looking and bystanders to see what's happening because we do have a lot of media and a lot of tension. Just to the left-hand side of me is all the cars all lined up which belong to the ministers waiting for the ceremony to finish where they'll disperse. They turned up in a couple of buses, and so they turned up together.
All right. So that is Anthony Ellis on the scene at the Royal Palace. Today is a big day for Cambodia. It's the first Prime Minister that the country has had in over 38 years. Prime Minister Hun Sen officially resigned his position this morning and handed it over to the care of his son. The National Assembly gave a vote of confidence this morning to Prime Minister Hun Manet and the cabinet that he has selected. So they are currently at the Royal Palace, presumably swearing an oath under the presidency of King Norodom Sihamoni. Prime Minister Hun Manet is the eldest son of former Prime Minister Hun Sen. He was chosen by the Cambodian People's Party as the future Prime Minister back in 2021. There was kind of some neither here nor there about whether or not he would be taking over this year. But according to former Prime Minister Hun Sen, the high voter turnout for the CPP last month mandated that he would be, in fact, switching over to the new generation of politicians. So, hi Anthony, can you hear us?
Yes, Kristen, thank you. So we just had to move positions. So just behind me you can see the gate, and as you look down the driveway we see the red carpet, and on each side of the red carpet we have the armed guards, which then leads up to the conference where the royal the royal conference, where the conference room where the king is doing the swearing in. And during their traditional procedure, they will get a glass, and it's holy water, which then they will make a promise that they will protect the country, they'll protect the people, and serve the people, and not any corruption or anything else. Taking that as a tradition as if something bad will happen to you if you go against those kind of rules.
Okay, so they're going to be swearing in an oath and taking in some blessed water to prevent.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, that's correct. And the National Assembly did it yesterday as well.
Okay. And what can we expect from new Prime Minister Hun Manet moving forward after today?
Well, in his speech today, he did mention the 6 priorities that he was going to follow up and continue, prove with education, to prove things for the poor, also help Cambodia becoming the higher bracket, also help with the poverty, with agriculture moving forward, and he asked everyone to back him and stand by them while they go through this process. Also, former Prime Minister Hun Sen said today he left them with a challenge today to get poverty as close as it can to zero. Pre-COVID, they were down to 7%, and unfortunately, because of COVID, it got back up to 10%. So, one of the challenges former Prime Minister Hun Sen is said is to bring poverty down and bring the country into the higher pay racket. So their society and wages can be up as everyone else around the area.
Very good. So he's got his mandate for the CPP of the high voter turnout. And you mentioned he was educated. He's received a bachelor's from West Point in economics. He went on to get his doctorate in economics from New York University. And then finally, his PhD is also in economics from the UK. So I guess we expect to see, some new economic policies. He did mention his Pentagon policy that's coming out.
Yeah, that's correct. He mentioned that, and this is why the former Prime Minister Hun Sen also elected his son and chose Hun Manet because of the education that has received. And moving forward, he thinks he's the best person to move the economy. I mean, we also remember during COVID-19, it did affect the whole world, but Cambodian's GDP at the moment is 7%, so it's doing fairly well considering a few other countries around the world and what we went through during COVID-19. So, and I think that would have also played a part of the Prime Minister's decision to retire this morning. But he's only retiring as Prime Minister. We must also remember he's still going to be staying in politics. So he's still going to run for the President of the Senate in 2024. And so he's still going to have his hand in politics, and he's also the President of the CPP party.
Right, so former Prime Minister Hun Sen did give his last speech as the Prime Minister today, but he has mentioned time and again that he will not be leaving Cambodian politics anytime soon. Now, what was the atmosphere like in the room when he was giving his final speech?
Well, when he was giving his final speech, he also said that he's not going to interfere if they need help, if Hun Manet or anyone needs help, to come and ask him, and then he'll give them some guidance. He also mentioned that he intends to do some tutoring, so to do some courses to explain some of the people. So the atmosphere, I think it was a bit of a mixed emotions because it is a historic event. And then towards the end of his speech, he mentioned last night during his tally movie, it was a real sad part where it was a bad stage with Hun Manet's life. So it actually brought a tear to him. He said, last night's episode, he got to see Hun Manet, which unfortunately Hun Sen had to leave Cambodia because of the Pol Pot regime and whatnot. And he'd come back, and Hun Manet was calling him uncle for 2 months. He felt like he hadn't done the right job as a father at that particular time, but there was no choice. So he was very emotional towards the end of his speech, and I think everyone around it kind of starting to realise it's becoming an end of an era.
Absolutely, yes. As you said, the average age of Cambodians is around 27. which means that most of the country has only ever experienced Prime Minister Hun Sen as the head of state.
Shocking. Sorry, Kristen, I'm just seeing. We've got another senator. I think it's Graham. He's just turning up now. I'm not sure. You can't see inside the dark window. Sorry, Kristen.
Yeah, so it looks like we've still got more dignitaries arriving. Any word on if the ceremony has started yet?
As far as we know, we're outside the palace. We can't get inside the gates, so we're only getting the feedback from what the security is telling us. So from what we can understand, it has begun. Like I said, I was told the ministers turned up in a couple of buses already in there. Their cars are already here outside the palace waiting for them to pick up. From what I've been told, after the ceremony they'll come outside the gate for a photo shoot before they leave the palace.
All right, well, we look forward to seeing that, and we will get back with you when it happens. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
So today we are at the Royal Palace after the National Assembly gave a vote of confidence to the new Prime Minister, Hun Manet, and the cabinet that he has appointed. About 24 new cabinet members were sworn in today, many of them themselves sons and daughters of ministry officials. So a lot of new faces coming into the cabinet. We have a new Prime Minister for the first time in almost 40 years in Cambodia. So it is a momentous occasion. Many Cambodians only remember having Prime Minister Hun Sen as the head of state. So looking forward to the future, Cambodia is hoping to be on track to become a high middle income country by 2030 and a high income country by 2050. So Prime Minister Hun Manet did outline his first phase of the new Pentagon policy, which is replacing the rectangle policy. So it's gone from 4 points to 5 points. It was a strategy worked out between the Asian Development Bank and the Ministry of Economy and Finance earlier this year. So his big specialty is in economics. He received his bachelor's in 2009, followed by his master's in 2011. Sorry, that was in 2002. So his bachelor's degree was in 1999, and that was from West Point, the American Military Academy. And he was actually the first Cambodian to graduate from that academy. Afterwards, he graduated from New York University with a master's in economics in 2002, and he finally obtained his doctorate, his PhD in economics, from the University of Bristol in the UK. Now, during that time, he had also become a member of the Cambodian Armed Forces. When he was nominated for the future Prime Minister, he was actually a commander in the Army. In 2018, he was made commander. He's also received the rank of a 4-star general. So he's got a bit of expertise between economy and military. There's been a lot of foreign leaders who are already familiar with his experiences through his military involvement. So Prime Minister Hun Manet is the eldest son of Prime Minister Hun Sen and was chosen as the Prime Minister in waiting by the CPP in 2021 under the presidency of his father. So he was officially appointed by the king earlier this month and has been organizing his own cabinet, which was approved by the National Assembly today. Of 10 deputy prime ministers, only 1 remained from the old administration. Meanwhile, only 6 of 30 ministers remained from the former administration. Many of the incoming ministers are children of previous ministers themselves, and they were approved this morning by a vote of confidence, and they are currently at the Royal Palace waiting to swear an oath in front of the king. So today is a momentous occasion in Cambodian history. We officially have a new Prime Minister, Prime Minister Hun Manet, who was approved by the National Assembly this morning by a vote of confidence. The National Assembly approved both him and his cabinet, and they are now on their way to a ceremony at the Royal Palace where they will be swearing an oath in front of the king to protect the nation and serve their interests. So Prime Minister Hun Sen officially resigned his role as Prime Minister after serving over 38 years in the role. He has been in Cambodian politics for over 44 years, and he decided it was time to let the next generation lead. So he announced that his resignation would be his own sacrifice for the benefit of the nation's stability. So he is going to remain in politics. He is the president of the Senate. He is president of the Cambodian People's Party. And he was also appointed today by the king as the president of the Supreme Council of the king, which does mean that when the king is abroad, out of the country, he is de facto the head of state. Prime Minister Hun Sen did mention that he intends to stay in politics for at least the next 10 years. He has a goal of reaching at least half a century in Cambodian politics. Prime Minister Hun Manet was nominated by the CPP in 2021 as the future Prime Minister, so he has been the Prime Minister in waiting since then, and it was only announced 3 days after last month's elections on July 26th that he would indeed become Prime Minister this year. So today is that day. He has been approved by the National Assembly, and he is now ready to swear his oath and start a new chapter in Cambodian history.
president of the former president of the Council.
I thought all the ministers are in this.
They are minister already, but this is the former president of the Council. It can go. I control. Saya lagi navigation. Okay.
In Phnom Penh, where the ministers will then
So we now have the Prime Minister arriving at the Royal Palace for the swearing of an oath in front of the King to officially designate the new Prime Minister, Hun Manet. So he is arriving. Other ministers presumably have already arrived. Some of the new ministers, many of them are children of current ministers, which include Minister of Interior Sar Soka, who is the son of Sa King, the former Minister of Interior. The current Defense Minister will be Tea Seha, after his father Tea Ban. The Minister of Social Affairs is Chia Sok Metia, who is the son of Chia Sim. The Minister of Land Management will be Se Som O, who is the Senate President's son, Se Chom. You've got the Minister of Tourism is Sok Soken, who is the son of former council minister. There will be
looking the camera.
So we're currently watching people arrive for the swearing in of the new Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers, who are taking an oath in front of the King today. They were already approved by the vote of confidence from the National Assembly this morning, and within a few hours they are expected to come out, and Cambodia will have its first new Prime Minister in 38 years. Thank you for watching.
No. Speak with Italy a little bit. This. Then you can summarize a little bit and okay. Finish.